Hi, welcome to Wrokdown. I'm Wendy Stapleton. My next guest is undoubtedly one of the icons of the Australian radio industry. He started off, as most jocks do, at a country radio station and has lived and worked in Melbourne ever since. Would you please welcome Gary Mack?
Wow.
I got it.
How do I follow an introduction like that, Wendy? Thank you.
Please just say something better than that.
Okay.
How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
Listen, my pleasure. We've actually known each other quite a few years, but
Yeah,
we've
we
never
have.
had a chance to have a good chat. And I do mean that you are an icon in the radio industry in Australia.
Well, someone said, it's better to have been a has-been than a never was.
I didn't say. I said
No.
I said icon. Let's start at the beginning.
Well, I was an immigrant from New Zealand.
Okay.
Someone said to me while I was trying to find something to do, I'd always had that thing about doing radio. In fact, I actually owned the radio, which was a hand-me-down from my parents. I actually owned the radio that as a little kid I used to lie on the floor and listen to the big speaker. And I've got that set up in the house now.
Still.
And it's wonderful. So I was always intrigued with radio, and in New Zealand I tried to get into what was called the NZBS, the New Zealand Broadcasting Service.
A bit like our ABC.
A bit like that, yes, and I failed dismally. And then someone put the idea in my head, let's go to Australia on a 6-week working holiday. I said, hey, let's do that. So it's been the longest 6 weeks of my life.
Did you go to Sydney or Melbourne?
I arrived in Sydney and immediately, within about 2 months, was at a radio school in Sydney, a little radio school in this old battered building, which these days is the Queen Victoria building because they resurrected this old building. And of course that's an icon building in Sydney. But I started my radio career in a dingy office in what was a building that was going to be torn down. And from there went to Newcastle, and in those days I was playing, rock and roll was here. I mean, I don't want to really date myself too far back, but the radio station that I started work at was really an easy music listen radio station. And I really wanted to get my teeth into rock and roll, man. That's what I wanted to do.
Sorry to interrupt, can I ask, when you went to the radio school and then went off to Newcastle, how was one taught to speak for radio school? Was it still very
yes,
very
oh yes,
correct?
It was fine and mild, winds from an easterly direction. Whereas nowadays it's great day out there, fine and mild.
I just wondered because I still have these fabulous memories of listening to the radio, and everybody was very
proper.
Very proper.
Very proper. So I wanted to experience this rock and roll thing. So I started to sniff around, and I went to work in the country, and it was the best thing that I ever did.
Where did you go?
It was the greatest experience of my life. I went to a little town called Mudgee. Mudgee's in New South Wales.
Oh,
it's directly west in from Sydney. It's just a tiny dot on the map. It had a main street there and another one there, and that was it. And they had this fantastic radio station. But it gave me the grounding that I really needed. I would write advertising copy. I'd even go out with the salespeople and sell advertising copy and extract dollars from the advertisers.
Hey, did you have to do... I'm just remembering a story that I think it was Barry Bissell told me that in the country station that he started in, they had to do the ladies... was it like the ladies' hour or something? But you had to announce all.
It was called Morning Women's. Every morning, I did the breakfast session. I started in the breakfast session. Now, breakfast is normally a show that you do after you've had about 2 or 3 years' experience. But I was thrown in the deep end. There I was doing breakfast, getting up at 4:30 in the morning, driving a broken down car to the radio station, with the bum hanging out of your pants, all of that, turning the radio station on. Getting everything organised, picking up a big box of records, because do you remember records?
Yes, of course I remember records. I love you for asking me that.
And then they would have on the log. We'd have to read all the funeral announcements out, and that could be quite daunting. And they had not the funeral march, but they had some appropriate classical piece
some dirt
that would run underneath, and we would say, the family and friends of the dearly departed would like to tell you that, you know, there'll be a service for the repose of her soul and so on, you know. It was very, very proper.
Yes, and serious.
And if anything happened, the phone would ring and people would say, that wasn't very nice. Because people were hanging on every word. Because really,
that's all they had.
As much as it was only yesterday, because things go by so quickly, I can't believe how fast the last couple of years have gone by. So it was only really yesterday that this was their only form of communication. Because in Mudgee, there were only 2 days of the week that the local newspaper came out. So the radio station was the oracle.
Absolutely.
It was the centre of the universe. Now, after Mudgee, I went to Bathurst. And I was in Bathurst for about 3 years, and then I came to Melbourne. So there you have it, in one fell swoop.
I seem to think that most good DJs were headhunted.
Yeah, and that happened to me. In fact, it happened rather quickly. I was in Bathurst, I'd been there for about 3 years, but I still had this hankering to try on a capital city, a metro area. And obviously being in New South Wales, I automatically thought of Sydney. However, the call came through one day. I was sitting, minding my own business, running my little radio program in Bathurst. The phone went, and it was a rather large rock radio station in Newcastle that had been aware of me from previous years and rang and said, we've got a position here, we'd like you to take it. Just like that. So I mulled it over and thought about it. And I rang them back and I accepted the job. So then, of course, I had to write my resignation out to the owners of the radio station that I was at. And the owners of the radio station that I worked at in Bathurst was the Packer family, who also owned 3AK in Melbourne.
In Melbourne.
So the radio station was being administered, if you like, through the Channel 9 3AK people here in Melbourne. So I sent my resignation. I resigned to the manager, who was a good friend of mine. He said, well, you've got to move on, you know. And the resignation came down to Melbourne. And about 2 days later, I'm in the studio presenting my breakfast program, thinking I'm going to be out of here in about 2 weeks' time, 2 weeks' notice, whatever. And the boss of the radio station, I'll never forget this, his name is Gary Day. And Gary Day rang me at about 4:45 in the morning, and he said, son, I heard you're going to Newcastle. And I said, yeah. He says, no, you're not, son. He said, you're coming to bloody Melbourne.
With a voice like that, he obviously wasn't on air, was he?
No. And I thought, wow, Melbourne. Hadn't even thought about it. And here I am. And they were fabulous times for that very short period of time, from the late 60s through to about 1973, 74. The place was electric. And it became a radio station in this town that was like no other. But we were playing tracks from albums on air like nobody else was at that time. It's different now, it's changed completely. But they were pretty exciting times. So therefore we had a presence in the rock industry at that time.
Can I just ask, I know you said it was Gary Day.
He was the boss.
The boss. Did Frank Packer or Kerry, who was in charge then?
Well,
Still Frank?
It was Sir Frank, yes.
Did he have any personal input into what actually went on with that? Because I know that he sort of always had his finger right on the rest of the station.
I have no doubt that he probably kept an eye on things, but as far as involvement, no.
I want to ask you another story about Sir Frank, when we come back, but we'll take a short break and be back soon with Gary Mack.
Wrokdown.
Welcome back to Wrokdown. I'm with the one and only Gary Mack, and we're at Channel 9 in Bendigo Street.
Yes.
In the 60s?
Late 60s,
Late
yes.
60s?
Late 60s through to middle 70s.
And we were just discussing Sir Frank Packer, a man to be reckoned with, or not to be, whichever way you look at it.
Well, not to be mixed up too much.
Not to be mixed up too much.
No. He had very definite ideas. He was successful at what he did.
Well, it was Channel 9 was sort of like that's where it was all pretty much
Sure, it
happening,
was.
wasn't
It was the centre of the universe in this country. It really was. And they did so well. They were so successful. They had everybody working there, you know. And he was the guy that ran the whole show.
So how rigid was your format then? I mean, what were you expected to do as far as even, say, programming? Were you allowed to...
In the beginning, yes, because you would sort of be given, say, a list of who you would need to play, but then you could play all the tracks that you wanted to play, but so long as you played all of these singers,
The ones that,
and you could play one or two or three of their songs, you know.
So who would give you the list of the things that must be played? Where would they gather their information?
Totally based on sales.
On sales.
On unit sales, yeah, yeah. And that's where the top 40 chart came from.
How do you think it happens now, though?
Well, to a
Wouldn't
large
it be hard
extent,
to sort of assess what's being downloaded?
Well, no, there is still evidence of you know who's downloading what. You know, it's hard to maybe target the demographics, although radio mostly is a young audience. It is a younger end audience, and they will sort of dictate the trends, if you like, as to the music that's being played.
But say, for example, now, you know, 3AW, the top rating, am I correct?
Yes, yes.
And it's Talkback.
Yes.
I'm not really sure who comes in second or third, but Talkback is sort of actually really up here at the moment.
Yeah, it's a proven formula.
So would you still say that radio today is a young person's market, or do you think that most people sort of end up with just their iPods?
Oh yeah, a lot of people are doing
and
that.
play what they want to hear. I know my daughter walks around with these things stuck in her head.
Yeah, well you see it everywhere.
All day.
A lot of people are choosing to download or transfer their CD library into their iPhone, into their iPod, and they can virtually program their own music. They can put in 12,000 songs and they can mix it up, and they can choose whatever they want to listen to whenever they want to listen to it, without having to rely on a radio station to play their favourite song when the radio station is ready to do that. That's how it's gone.
It's gone, yeah.
3AW is really a force to be reckoned with. I mean, it's a radio station that a very wide demographic listen to.
Okay, so when you left AK?
Oh, I moved on. I'm one of those strange people that has had the opportunity of working for every radio station in this town, with the exception of Nova, and I don't think I meet their demographic anymore, but I've done things at all radio stations in this town, and I've enjoyed doing that, and I'm still involved. I do voiceovers for the odd radio station here
I know you do.
And as much as I'm not involved in radio per se as being employed by any one radio station, I'm able to move around and enjoy all of them, if you like, from time to time.
Just quickly before we go to another break, was there one particular era or time or station that you have the fondest memories of?
Love the 70s. Love the 70s and the music. And I was also involved with being the disc jockey, the guy that played the music at a couple of leading discos in Melbourne at that time.
Which were?
The good old Silvers days.
Oh yeah.
You remember Silvers? The Love Machine. Now these were clubs, unlike they are today, where people got dressed up to the nines to go.
Where was the Love Machine?
Love Machine was down in Clermont Street in South Yarra.
Oh, okay.
I think it's still a club, or I'm not sure whether it's still a club anymore. It's no longer called the Love Machine. But they were days where people would get really dressed up. I mean, it was nothing for a guy to walk in a suit that looked $1 million, and the girls would wear the long evening sort of dresses, but then girls have always dressed up to go out, whereas guys are a bit slobby sometimes. But this was different, and the waiters were in bow ties, and you could get a meal there, and it was fine wine and dining, and probably the best disco music in the world being played. It was fabulous.
We're going to take a break, but when we come back, before we went on air, I have to be honest, we were having a chat about some of the wonderful people that you worked with, and Grantley D's name came up.
Oh, yeah.
So I know you have a couple of wonderful stories, and I've heard about them, but it has to come from the horse's mouth.
Okay.
You were there. When we come back, some stories from Gary Mack.
Wrokdown.
Welcome back to Wrokdown. I'm with Gary Mack. Now, I heard this story a long, long time ago, I think probably from a couple of guys that were in bands that played with Grantley D.
Oh, yes, Deedles.
What was his name?
Well, we called him Deedles.
Deedles.
Grantley D, he called himself Deedles.
He had a fantastic sense of humour.
He did. He did. He had one of the quickest wits. He was just like a human dynamo. The fact that he was blind didn't matter. He didn't have a disability. But I do recall one incident, and this comes with a warning, boys and girls, don't do this at home.
No, yes.
We were on the beach broadcast. 3AK used to have these beach broadcasts where we'd start off on Boxing Day, I think it was, down at Portsea. We'd work our way around the bay, and we'd end up on Elwood Beach with a Miss Victorian Beach Girl quest, and a lot of fun for everyone. And we used to have sand modelling competitions. We'd have bands on the beach. Zoot would be there in those days. All those bands were there. It was fabulous. And myself and Lionel York were sort of the two mainstays that went daily around the beach. It was like being on holiday, really. It was crazy. And we were, I think, at Sorrento. And there was a program on Channel 9, because there was a lot of cross-promotion between the two, between the radio station and the TV station. And there was a program on Channel 9 called Daktari. And it was set in Africa, and this big sort of truck which looked like a zebra. And we had the exact replica on the beach. And of course this thing was like, it was like a searchlight. When it drove down the road, you know, you couldn't help but miss it. Like a beacon. So it's about 3 o'clock in the morning, and we've run short of mixer for the drinks. And the pub bar had closed. So someone said, we could go down to the local service station. That's open just down the road. And Grantley said, "I'll come for the ride." So Alan Aitken and myself, we go out, we have the keys to the Daktari wagon, and I jump in to drive, and Grantley said, "Let me drive." And we said, "Yeah, sure." So I get out, Grantley gets in behind the wheel, I'm sitting next to Grantley. It's a bit like the movie, if you've seen the movie See No Evil, Hear No Evil.
I'm going to go and watch it now,
You
for
have
sure.
to see it. So we're telling Grantley, just turn a little bit to the right, now a little bit to the left, now just a little more on the gas and I'll change the gears for you. This is at 3 o'clock in the morning, driving down Nepean Highway. Now fortunately we didn't go very far. We might have driven, dare I say, half a kilometre, breaking the law like you wouldn't believe.
Oh, I think so.
A blind
Just a little
man
bit.
driving a car with two fools sitting in the front seat.
Yeah, but you
As
two were
well.
probably blind as well by then.
Probably.
Well, I'd heard that story, and I just wanted to. I wanted to hear it from the horse's mouth.
That was
You
a
were
bit of
sitting
fun.
next to him. So, can you tell us? I know that for probably how many years now that you've been running these fantastic. Is it like schools, radio schools, or
Yeah.
can you explain?
It was about 84, I think it was. I wanted to give something back, and I felt that I had an ability, if you like, to impart some knowledge. So we created a radio school here in Melbourne, which we ran, owned and operated for 20 years. And over that period of time, a huge number of people got jobs and are still working in the industry. And there is life after radio, as much as I'm still a part of it, but only about that much now. I find that I'm busy doing other things. I'm involved in voice training on a one-on-one basis. I run a small studio from home. I do the odd voiceover here and there. I transfer scratchy old records and put them onto CDs, and transfer videotapes and put them onto DVDs. And I enjoy doing a whole variety of different things now.
Well, Gary, thank you for coming on the show. I know that you've got a million stories that you could tell us, and I hope people remember not to try what Grant Lee did.
No, don't do that at home, boys and girls.
Don't do that at home in the Dactari machine. What happens with all of the old tapes and things that because now, of course, you don't have them anymore?
No, well, these days, and it's great that we can save anything now, and we can put it onto a little memory stick, or a little external hard drive, and it'll hold millions of tons of stuff, which you can put in your pocket and go home. Mm-hmm. Back then, of course, everything was on either 2-inch recording videotape, or it was on audio tape, which were on big bulky reels and all of that. And I can recall a radio station, I suppose this happened in most radio stations, there comes a use-by date where this is no longer required. Here's all this stuff that we've recorded and we've kept, but it's taking up space, so let's get rid of it. And off it goes to the tip. And that's really what happened to a lot of the stuff from 3XY. And 3XY was a radio station that was a force in this town. And many people will remember it because it was a great rock and roll radio station. I did a little bit of freelance work for them, but it was only about that much, and it was after their heyday. But they recorded, arguably, some of the best rock and roll music specials with all the Australian talent over a great many years. And they would play them, and they were just the most fabulous interviews and stories that came out of that period of time, interwoven with all their music and so on. Then the tapes would just simply sit on the shelves. The radio station was then sold, was all packed up, put in a box, sent away somewhere. And when they resurrected the old 3XY license, and 3EE The Breeze came along, which is a radio station a lot of people probably will say, what did he say? But it's a frequency that's now used by 3AW, the 693 frequency. When that began, it was the resurrection of the old 3XY license, so it gets a bit convoluted. And I was involved at the beginnings of that radio station, and all this old 3XY stuff came back in these big compactors with all these tapes. And we'd open up these compactors and say, wow, there's that interview that so-and-so did with such and such. This is like gold. And the owners of the radio station one day walked in and said, we don't need any of this, get rid of it. And they threw it all in a dump master.
Did you jump in?
Well, I jumped in along with a couple of other people, and we managed to salvage, not all of it, but a lot of it. So that's in storage somewhere. I'm not quite sure where it ended up, but I'm hoping that it's in a safe place.
Oh, you haven't got it?
I don't have it, no, but I know where it is. And hopefully one day hopefully the tapes have lasted.
It's archival history.
It is, and it's unfortunate that, there are some that will say, no, we don't need this anymore, throw it away. I know you can only keep a certain amount of it, but this was stuff that is part of our culture.
I think we have to find the container.
Maybe we do.
You're a wonderful person. It's great to have you on the show. And in your best radio voice, would you say, on behalf of Wendy and I, we'd like to say good night to all our viewers at Wrokdown?
On behalf of Wendy and I, we've enjoyed being at your place. Thanks for having us.